Every society runs on stories. Not just the stories we tell each other around a table, but the big, invisible stories that tell us how to live, what to value, and who to be. In this presentation, we will explore what those stories are, who writes them, what happens when they fall apart, and how communities can build something better. Welcome to Cultural Master Narratives, how societal scripts shape our behavior, why they eventually break down, and how communities rebuild trust. Think of society as a building. Every building needs a blueprint, a plan that tells you where the walls go, what holds the roof up, and how everything fits together. Society has blueprints too. They're called cultural master narratives, the top-level scripts that define what it means to be a good citizen. These scripts rest on three pillars: morals, norms, and expectations. They act as the social glue that holds communities together, resolves conflict, builds shared identity, and preserves collective memory. Without them, society has no shared foundation. Here's a critical question. Who actually writes these blueprints? The answer is that dominant cultural narratives are rarely neutral. They flow from the top down, from a kind of control room operated by powerful institutions. These institutions intentionally engineer the master scripts of a society to achieve specific social goals, to control information, or to legitimize existing inequalities. In other words, the rules of the game are often written by the people who benefit most from them. A clear historical example is the mid-20th century American dream. This narrative came pre-packaged with a checklist: embrace consumer capitalism, conform to social uniformity, own a suburban home, and fulfill traditional gender roles. These weren't just cultural preferences. They were established as the markers of a successful, mentally healthy citizen. The consequence? Anyone whose life looked different was actively stigmatized. Alternative lifestyles, non-traditional family structures, and differing political views were treated as pathological, as signs that something was wrong with you. Engineered narratives don't just define the norm, they define the other. But here's the problem. Life doesn't always follow the script. Imagine someone who does everything right, works hard, follows the rules, plays by society's standards, and still can't get ahead. They're living paycheck to paycheck, sinking deeper into debt, with no upward mobility in sight. Their lived reality sits far below the promise the narrative made them. This gap between what the story promises and what life actually delivers is not a personal failure. It's a fundamental contradiction, and it directly challenges the societal myth of meritocracy, the idea that hard work alone leads to success. When a person's life simply cannot be made to fit the dominant master narrative, something painful happens inside them. Picture a round object colliding with a rigid cube. They don't fit, and the impact sends shockwaves in every direction. That collision is what we call narrative dissonance. When someone can't reconcile who they are with who society says they should be, they may experience an existential identity crisis, deep questions of self-worth, shame, and confusion about their place in the world. So, how do people cope? Many learn to wear a mask. To survive systems shaped by unbalanced power, individuals curate public personas, a carefully constructed face they show the world. They code switch, adjusting their language and behavior depending on who's in the room. They conceal parts of their identity. They perform roles that align with dominant cultural expectations, not because those roles reflect who they are, but because conforming to them offers access to economic mobility and physical safety. It's a rational survival strategy in an irrational system. But survival has a cost. Look at that battery, nearly empty. Acting out a public narrative that constantly contradicts your honest self takes immense effort, day after day. This isn't just inconvenient, it creates severe psychological strain. The ongoing disconnect between your inner self and your outer performance leads to a fractured sense of identity. Over time, the energy required to maintain this performance depletes a person's mental and emotional reserves, making it increasingly difficult to function, connect, and thrive. A society holds together as long as the majority accepts the blueprint. Think of it as a scale. On one side, the weight of the engineered narrative. On the other, the collective masks people wear to perform compliance. But when too many individuals can no longer hold up their masks, when the gap between the narrative's promises and lived reality becomes too wide, those masks begin to fall. And when enough of them fall at once, the scale tips. The gap between the promised narrative and tangible reality becomes unsustainable. The system destabilizes. When the system destabilizes, we enter what is called a legitimation crisis, and the image here tells the story. The bridge between institutions and the public fractures and collapses. Trust breaks down. People feel betrayed by the very systems that were supposed to serve them. Making things worse, engineered narratives tend to polarize communities into opposing camps, good guys versus bad guys, creating a spiral of silence where dissenting voices are suppressed and genuine dialogue becomes impossible. The bridge doesn't just crack, it falls. And in the modern era, this process is turbocharged. Digital algorithms don't just reflect our divisions, they amplify them. Rather than facilitating factual, nuanced dialogue, algorithms are designed to maximize engagement. And what drives engagement? Emotion, outrage, us versus them. The result is that engineered narratives are weaponized into viral memes, emotionally charged, polarizing, and endlessly recycled in echo chambers. These two loops, spinning in separate directions, represent communities locked in their own information worlds, unable or unwilling to find common ground. Constructive dialogue erodes. The divide widens. So what do we do? The first step is to erase the old grid. To counteract severe polarization and the breakdown of trust, communities must stop relying on pre-written, top-down cultural blueprints. These rigid grids have defined who belongs, who is normal, and who is the other for too long. The solution isn't to simply replace one script with another. It requires a more fundamental shift in how societal rules are established and in who gets a voice in writing them. The alternative is organic storytelling, and it looks nothing like a top-down blueprint. Instead of a neat grid controlled from one central point, imagine a web of interconnected nodes, each one a different voice, a different experience, all linked together in a rich, complex network. Authentic cohesion is built from the bottom up, through collaborative sense-making, where communities co-construct narratives based on their own shared lived experiences. This is especially vital for marginalized groups, whose stories have historically been excluded from the dominant script. When communities share their real experiences, they create a crucial safety net, one woven from trust, recognition, and solidarity. Let's put it side by side. Engineered narratives are built from the top down by institutions. Organic storytelling is built from the bottom up through lived experiences. Organic storytelling validates distinct journeys and challenges the dominant center. And the outcomes? Engineered narratives lead to dissonance, polarization, and silence. Organic storytelling results in shared trust, cohesion, and empowerment. The contrast couldn't be clearer. And this is where hope lives. Rebuilding trust isn't a top-down process. It's a collaborative one. Like hands coming together to complete a puzzle, it requires everyone to bring their piece. Validating individual experiences is the antidote to rigid norms. When people share their authentic personal journeys, when those stories are heard, honored, and woven together, communities build empowering alternative narratives. This process does two things at once. It restores the individual's sense of identity, and it rebuilds shared community trust from the ground up. Not imposed from above, but grown from within.